So this video is going to focus more on mental disorders, mental conditions, etc., since that's usually what people mean when they say self-diagnosis is bad. So I'm going to focus mostly on mental stuff. Basically, from a medical point of view, a psychology point of view, whatnot, self-diagnosis has a purpose, it has a place. If you follow it up with a doctor's visit, therapy visit, etc. If you're looking through and you're like, oh shit, I think I have depression, time to book a therapy session and talk about it with a professional psychiatrist. This is really the purpose and the point of self-diagnosis, for you to sit at home and try to figure it out yourself, and then you can kind of take your concerns and worries with you to your doctor, to your therapist, psychologist, whatnot. So you can kind of have an idea of what you think might be going on with you, what you think might be wrong with you, etc. This also allows for you to sit down and figure out all of your symptoms. Because one of the important things when you go to get any kind of diagnosis, regardless of what it is, you need to know your symptoms. You can't get a diagnosis if you have no friggin' clue what your symptoms are. And that's what self-diagnosis really helps with. It helps you really look at your symptoms, figure out what symptoms are actually symptoms and what just might be you overreacting to something, or might just simply be something that's perfectly normal that you just didn't realize was perfectly normal. And this sort of stuff happens. But self-diagnosis can be a problem wherein you just decide, I've got depression. I'm not going to do anything about it, but I've got depression. I'm not going to see anyone about it, but I've got depression. That's where self-diagnosis can be a problem. And that's usually what most people complain about with self-diagnosis, is people who just decide they've got all these different mental disorders and all this other shit. I've got depression, anxiety, I'm bipolar, I've got blah, 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 every type of thyroid problem you can imagine, etc., etc., etc. This is where most people complain. It's like, oh, you probably haven't been officially diagnosed with any of that crap, so it's all fake. Which, you can't really just automatically say it's fake. Because if you think you got something, go and check it out, obviously, if you can. But don't just assume something's fake because someone is self-diagnosed with it and haven't yet actually gone to a professional to get it diagnosed. Because the minute you just assume it's fake, one, you're being an ass. Two, what if it's not? But of course, go to a therapist, go to a psychologist, go to a doctor. They are professionally trained. Chances are you're not. And even if you are someone who's professionally trained, second opinions count. Especially if it's something rare or uncommon, or you're someone who can't take certain meds, then yeah, get a second opinion, get a third opinion, get a 25th opinion if you want. So self-diagnosis does have a purpose, it has its uses. Automatically running around screaming self-diagnosis is horrible, self-diagnosis is bad, don't assume you have anything ever, doesn't do anyone any fucking good. All it does is it leads to people assuming that their symptoms are not really symptoms of anything, and they're just perfectly okay and fine. Which can lead to them actually having some sort of disorder that they just ignore because they assume they're normal. Because everyone's like, oh, there's no such thing as self-diagnosis. It's not real. You're just like a regular fucking person, when they turn out to have depression or anxiety. Self-diagnosis has a place. Don't just fucking shit on it alone at all. Where I more have a problem with people who self-diagnose is the people who wear their mental conditions like a badge of honor. That's fucked up. A mental disorder, any kind of disorder really, isn't something you should want to have. It isn't something that's honorable and great and makes you perfect and special and utterly unique to have. It's not something you should be proud of. I do understand putting some conditions like in your head, or like, by the way, I have depression, or by the way, I was an abuse victim. Because some of that can be important to a viewer of their channel, someone who subscribes to them, etc. Because you never know, they might do a lot of videos about depression. So sometimes, yeah, writing down that you've got this disorder makes sense. But if you're just listing 25 different disorders, like, hey, by the way, I have all of these things, you're kind of wearing it like some sort of badge of honor, and it's not. It's not something you should be proud of, touting off to everyone. Your personal medical history you really should keep to yourself as much as you can. Obviously, like, if you're making a video about depression, yeah, that's the point in time where if you have depression, yeah, to say it. Because that's the perfect fucking place for that sort of thing. But it doesn't need to be in your Tumblr bio that you have 22 different types of bipolarism or whatever. It doesn't need to be in your Tumblr bio. It doesn't need to be in your YouTube bio. It's unnecessary, and really, no one should be proud of having a mental disorder. Oh my god. My hair hates me today. Please stay. You shouldn't be proud of it. You shouldn't wear it as some, oh, look at me. I've got this problem. Baby me. Love me. I'm weird. Haha. No. Because the other problem with that is you're sort of mocking people who have it. Whether you have it or not, you're mocking other people who do. Because they might be utterly embarrassed by it, and then they're seeing you react this way, and you're like, I don't want to be associated with that person. You're doing a disservice, really, to everyone who actually has a condition, whether you have it or not. And I guess there are people out there who just decide they have a condition, whether they actually have it or not, just because they want to be special and want to be part of Team Depression or whatever. With that, it's just what the fuck? A mental disorder isn't some sort of special fancy club where you get free pizza. If it did, then everybody would have fucking depression, because everyone loves free pizza. But it isn't something you should actively seek out to have at all. It's not fantastic, it's not great, it's not some wonderful joyous club. And if you think you do genuinely have it, then go to a therapist, go to your doctor, whatever. And, have them look at it, see what they think. And if you actually have it, then, well, you actually have it. The whole world doesn't really need to know. You can tell the whole world if you want to, but it is unnecessary. And people do get annoyed by it. And honestly, why the fuck are you shoving your possible or definite mental problem or physical problem in other people's faces? It's unnecessary, and a lot of people just see it as fucking rude. And also, it's also with people who have the condition as well, they might not want to hear about someone else having depression because it makes them feel more depressed. So they're like, I don't want to associate with anyone who actually labels themselves as depressed because I don't want to hear anything about depression because it will make me worse. Same with anxiety, same with eating disorders, especially with the eating disorders, actually. Most of the times, someone with an eating disorder being around anyone else who does it will make them way worse. So tout not that you have an eating disorder, honestly. You're doing a disservice to other people with it, for sure. You're probably making yourself worse as well. And, again, seek professional medical help. It's not a badge of honor. But, to reiterate, self-diagnosis has its purpose and its place, followed up with professional help, professional look, or at the very least a second opinion. However, I do understand, and everyone should understand, that not everyone can go to the doctor or can go to therapy. Here in Canada, going to a doctor's visit is basically or always free. Therapy sessions, it depends. You can get some free depending on where. Like my university, you can go in for a therapy session completely free. But I know in places like America, no. Everything costs like $20,000. So it really depends on where you live. Someone might not be able to go and actually get professionally diagnosed. That doesn't automatically mean they don't have the condition. It also depends on where you live. Like, some places, there might not be a therapist for, miles and miles. And they might have to drive, for fucking 7 hours just to go to a therapist to get officially diagnosed. And they just might not have the time in their life to do that shit. So, getting officially professionally diagnosed isn't always possible. It's obviously the best, because then you can generally do something. You can get medication for it. You can get advice on what the fuck to do, etc. But it isn't always possible. And some people, when they self-diagnose themselves, they've spent months, years, researching the fuck out of it and doing looks at themselves and everything. And they know the condition so inside and out that it's ridiculous at this point. And those kind of people, yeah, usually they do have the condition. They just can't get diagnosed with it. And also, in regards to getting treatment, not everybody can get treatment. There are some people that they can't get treatment because they're allergic to the pills, they're too expensive, or it's just simply something that they can't do in their current life. So don't expect everyone who has a condition, whether it be self-diagnosed or otherwise, to actually take medication for it, etc., because they just might not be able to. Basically, don't be a dick and don't make assumptions. And I guess one of the things I really hate about people who hate self-diagnosers is that they tend to assume that everyone is self-diagnosed. There'll be this one person in the comment section talking about their anxiety problem, the other person will go in, oh, bitch, go get yourself officially diagnosed, you fucking whore. No one likes someone who just pretends to have anxiety. It's like, where the fuck did they say they were self-diagnosed, you cunt? So, don't assume people are self-diagnosed. I know that people like to think that there's this huge, fucking abysmal trend of self-diagnosis, but there's really not. There's more self-diagnosis today than there was, like, 10 years ago, 100 years ago, but that's because the internet exists. It's kind of hard to self-diagnose yourself with something when you have no way of knowing if it's a symptom of something. You just be like, okay, I feel sad sometimes. This shit really freaks me out, but, I mean, I don't know. I don't really like spiders, but what the fuck's a phobia? The internet allows for people to self-diagnose hundreds of times easier than it used to. Like, self-diagnosis, you couldn't do that too much before. People did it still, but you couldn't do it for sure because the internet. So, of course, there's more self-diagnosis today, but there isn't some massive trend of self-diagnosing of every fucking person. Oh, I've got this condition, I've got this condition, I've got this condition, I've got that condition, I've got this condition. No, that's not what's going on. If anything, I think it's people just blowing that out of proportion. They see a few people who are popular having all these problems, and they just decide everyone's deciding to have problems. And it's like, no. Y'all are being biased in what you're looking for. So, self-diagnosis has its place. It's useful and important. Don't discredit someone just because they were originally or currently are self-diagnosed. Not everybody can get diagnosed officially at all, for who knows what reasons, and not everybody can do something about the diagnosis once they get diagnosed, because of other problems you don't know. So, yeah.